Hello, and welcome to Sophia's Roulette. Tonight we have Dr. Tamana Khosla, who will be lecturing on propaganda. The Kialo discussion link will be posted in the show notes with the recording on Sophia's Roulette YouTube channel, along with source material for this evening's lecture. Tonight we have the brilliant Dr. Tamana Khosla, author of the Feminist Manifesto, The China, India, Russia, Rise of Euro-Asian Civilization, professor, feminist, individualist. Again, the topic for this evening is propaganda. Tamana, would you like to start?
Yeah, so the title of my lecture today is Propaganda and Requirement of Ethics. Now, the propaganda is a conceptual model in political economy advanced by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky to explain how propaganda and systematic biases function in corporate mass media. The model seeks to explain how populations are manipulated and how consent for economic, social, and political policies, both foreign and domestic, is manufactured. So this is the book which Chomsky wrote, in the 80s on manufactured consent. How media basically, seizes consent from people, through their own the way they write stuff, and how this is manufactured in the public mind due to this propaganda. The theory posits that the way in which corporate media is structured, example through advertising, concentration of media ownership, or government sourcing, creates an inherent conflict of interest and therefore acts as propaganda of anti-democratic elements. So, first presented in 1988 book, Manufacturing Consent, The Political Economy of Mass Media, the propaganda model views corporate media as businesses interested in the sale of a product, readers and audiences to other businesses rather than the pursuit of quality journalism and service. So, it's not quality journalism which is being manufactured, but it is all shady, because it's like that is what is a political economy of mass media. And describing the media societal purpose, Chomsky writes, the study of institutions and how they function must be scrupulously ignored apart from fringe elements or relatively obscure scholarly literature. The theory postulates 5 general classes of filters that determine the type of news that is presented in news media. These five classes are ownership of medium, the medium's funding sources, sourcing, flag, and anti-communism. The first 3 are generally regarded by the author as being the most important. In version published after 9/11 attack, it was like the war of terror was included in this particular uh, in the book, for example. So now the first filter is ownership. The size and profit seeking imperative of dominant media corporations creates a bias. The authors point to how in early 19th century a radical British press had emerged that addressed the concern of workers, but excessive stamp duties designed to restrict newspaper ownership to the respectable wealthy began to change the face of the press. So the face of the press began to change, So, so nevertheless, there remained a degree of diversity. In post World War II Britain, radical or worker friendly newspapers came into being, which were like pro left, for example, and these were like Daily Herald, News Chronicle, Sunday Citizen, all since failed or absorbed into other publications. I guess this particular aspect is being this is happening in India as well. We have our major newspapers, which are being absorbed by the corporates. So I guess this is a phenomena. I mean, what do you think, Cindy? Is it happening in US as well?
Oh my goodness, yes. Yes. And they report what the people who sign their checks want them to report.
Yeah, yeah. So this is what happened during the Second World War as well. So this is happening in India, and we are having, there's no neutral press which is being there now. So So the authors posit that these earlier radical papers were not constrained by corporate ownership and therefore were free to criticize the capitalist system. Herman and Chomsky argue that since mainstream media outlets are currently either large corporations or part of conglomerates, the information presented to the public will be biased with respect to these interests. So, like these, because they are being absorbed by the corporates, and so, there is no like pro right or pro left kind of a media. It depends on the country's rulership, which is ruling right now, is the one which is absorbing the, and money is something which is regulating all these things. So, people, corporates, for example, they are having their news according to themselves. It's not that these things are happening by themselves. There is nothing like freedom right now. This is what is happening right now. So now the second one is advertising. The second filter of propaganda model is funding generating through advertising. Most newspapers have to attract advertising in order to cover the cost of production. Without it, they would have to increase the price of their newspapers. There is fierce competition throughout the media to attract advertisers. A newspaper which gets less advertising than its competitor is at a serious disadvantage. Lack of success in raising advertising revenue was another factor in the demise of people's newspapers. So, because people's newspaper is something which is which is obviously pro people, so it's not being funded by people. So, how would the newspaper be able to ever have garnered a position um, which is pro people? Because they're all because without advertising, newspapers can't function. So, you have all these newspapers. I mean, I'm more aware about the Indian newspapers. I mean, obviously, I read American newspapers as well, but and English newspaper like Guardian, etc. So, but this is the whole problem. And the product is composed of affluent readers who buy the newspapers, who also comprise the educated decision-making sector of the population, while the actual clientele served by the newspaper includes the businesses that pay to advertise their goods. According to this filter, the news is filler to get privileged readers to see the advertisement, which makes up the content and will thus take whatever form is most conducive to attracting educated decision makers. Now, the third is sourcing. The third of Thurman and Chomsky five filters relates to sourcing of mass media news. The mass media are drawn into a symbiotic relationship with powerful sources of information by economic necessity and reciprocity of interest. Even large media corporations such as BBC cannot afford to place reporters everywhere. So, there are like specific places like Westminster, the Palace, the financial, the 10 Downing Street, for example, or, or the financial capital of UK or US. These places are where people are being placed. The reporters are being placed. So the sourcing, what I'm talking about. So these places are being reported. Because even they don't have so much of money, so that they can place them everywhere. So I mean, at least in India, for example, India, I've seen that, we have, the places where things are like done properly, like things which are like where, actual news is taking place, the media is going to go there. But it is not going to go there where it doesn't give proper news. So, so that is the whole thing. Although British newspapers may occasionally complain about spin doctoring of New Labour, for example, they are dependent upon the pronouncements of the Prime Minister's personal spokesperson. So, they are dependent upon the private spokesperson of the Prime Minister, for example. So, for example, the Ministry of External Affairs, the minister, for example, in India, we have that kind of a system, where the minister speaks for the government. I guess the same is in US as well. I mean, you must be knowing better, Cindy. The fourth filter is flack, described by Herman and Chomsky as negative response to media statement or TV or radio programs. It may take the form of letters, telegrams, phone calls, petitions, lawsuits, speeches and bills before Congress, and other modes of complaint, threat, and punitive action. Business organizations regularly come together to form flag machines. An example is the US-based Global Climate Coalition, comprising fossil fuel and automobile companies such as Exxon, Texaco, and Ford. The GCC, or the Global Climate Coalition, was conceived by Burson Marsteller, one of the world's largest public relation companies, to attack the credibility of climate scientists and scare stories about global warming. So global warming is something which was which they created a scare, you know that this is what is happening, and the climate scientists were like in the picture, for example. So for Chomsky and Herman, flag refers to negative responses to a media statement or program. Now anti-communism and fear is the fifth one. Now the final news filter that Herman and Chomsky identified was anti-communism. Manufacturing consent was written during the Cold War. Chomsky updated the model as fear, often as an enemy or evil dictator such as Colonel Gaddafi, Paul Biya, Saddam Hussein, and Vladimir Putin, which is happening even right now. Putin is trying to expand his horizon, and that is what was his aim from the very beginning. So now he is the villain. He is the villain of the West. Though the eastern part of the world is not looking at him in that particular way. In India, for example, when we needed oil, for example, we did not listen to US. US said, please do not buy oil from them. But what could India do? Because we needed cheap oil. And also, secondly, India had a problem that, if Russia, China, and Pakistan get together, we'll have all enemies, on the side. So we could not afford to neglect Russia. So it's like personal, that is the geopolitics of this country. We have to understand that particular aspect, that every country is going to look at a person as at a leader in a certain way. For example, Pakistan is not a villain for China, but it is a villain for India. So, this is exemplified in British tabloid headlines of Smash Saddam and Kloba Sloba. The same is said to extend to mainstream reporting of environmentalists as eco-terrorists. The environmentalists are called eco-terrorists, because, they are like terrorizing the governments, for example, to follow a certain pattern of, the Sunday Times ran a series of articles in 1999 accusing activists from the non-violent direct action against Reclaim the Street of stocking up on CS gas and stun guns. Anti-ideologies exploit public fear and hatred of groups that pose a potential threat, either real, exaggerated, or imagined. Communism once posed the primary threat according to the model. Communism and socialism were portrayed by their detractors as endangering freedom of speech, movement, and press, and so forth. So this is what was the threat of communism. Now, another is the threat of, some scholars agree that Islamophobia is replacing anti-communism. So, this is the problem. I'm sure US has a lot of problem of Islamophobia. Same in India. This is the whole thing. So, yeah.
Is it really bad in India?
It's really it's majorly in India also. Though India is a secular country, and because of the rightist government, I guess, the propaganda is a bit too much right now, and I guess the educated class is not in favor of this particular aspect, but the government, even if it's possibly saying verbally that this is not true, that we are not Islamophobic, but I guess somewhere this element is there. So I mean, I guess because like for example the Ram temple, I mean, I hope you've heard of it. I mean, we have a Ram is a deity, in India. So in Ayodhya, there is this there was a mosque and the Ram temple. I mean, it was said that Ram was born in that particular place in Ayodhya. Now, later on when Mughals came in, they placed a mosque there. So now the tussle is that like why is there this is Ram's place of birth, the this thing the mosque should not be there. So now the Ram temple has been built by the righteous government there, and like when it's going to be opened, like it's going to be massively open to the world. It's like majorly, the world is going to come and visit the we call it Ram Lala. Ram Lala means the child, Ram as a child, when where he was born. So so he was born there. So it's going to be open to the world, and majorly functions are being made and created, and like many functions are being done for this particular fact. So yeah, so Islamophobia is there, we can't neglect that, but the other opposition parties are having Hindu phobia. so, so like they are having Hindu phobia. So like, so the Congress, for example, it's like Hindu phobic. They are like having, they are like, they are not Islamophobic, they're Hindu phobic. So like there is a lot of tension in India right now, like so. So yeah.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that's like. Like you got the
Yes, yes.
Hindi phobic on one side and the Islamic phobic on the other side. Oh my goodness.
It's total chaos in India right now,
Mm.
majorly, because we are having elections in 224 the same way you are having elections in 2024. So yeah. So coverage of enemy countries. The polls show that all opposition parties, for example, in Nicaragua, combined had the support of only 9% of the population, but that they have 100% of Stephen Kenza. Examples of bias given by authors include the failure of media to question the legality of Vietnam War, for example. The media can do a lot, but if media decides not to do it, it's to the harm of the public. I mean, people in India are scared to speak, because you don't know who is going to take on to you. It can be the opposition party or it can be the ruling party. I don't know how is the freedom of press or freedom of speech is there in US, for example, but this is what is happening, and while greatly emphasizing the Soviet Afghan war as an act of aggression, other biases include a propensity to emphasize violent acts such as genocide more in the enemy or unfriendly countries such as Kosovo, while ignoring greater genocide in allied countries such as Indonesian occupation of East Timor. So, for example, genocides happening in certain countries. Certain countries which are friendly countries are ignored, while the ones which are like non-friendly, there it's exaggerated. The media exaggerates the whole genocide concept. I mean, it's happened in India too. Because some newspapers were like majorly, like I mean, the Sikh riots, for example, which took place in 1984. Many journalists, for example, they amplified it, while there were like Gujarat riots, for example, which were like attributed to the rightist government, for example. Narendra Modi was in charge of this particular government that time, and so many journalists who were like pro-left, they charged him majorly, though the courts, for example, they did not accuse him, but the Congress, for example, is still kind of accusing him all the time, that he's the one who is responsible for Gujarat riots. So since the publication of Manufacturing Consent, Herman and Chomsky have adopted the theory and have given it a prominent role in their writings, lectures, and theoretical frameworks. Chomsky has made extensive use of its explanative power to lend support to his interpretation of mainstream media attributes towards a wide array of events, including the following: Gulf War, the media's failure to report on Saddam's peace offers. Saddam made certain peace offers, but they were like neglected. Secondly, Iraq invasion 2003, the media failure to report the legality of the war, despite overwhelming public opinion in favor of invading Iraq with UN authorization. According to the liberal watchdog group Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, there was a disproportionate focus on pro-war sources, while total anti-war sources only made up 10% of media, with only 3% of US sources being anti-war. Fourthly, global warming. A 2004 study found that the media gives near equal balance to people who deny climate change, despite only about 1% of climate scientists taking this view. Ellie Lehrer of the American Enterprise Institute, now I'm talking about the criticism of Chomsky's view, criticized the theory in the anti-Chomsky reader. According to Lehrer, the fact that papers like the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have disagreements is evidence that the media is not a monolithic entity. Lehrer also believed that media cannot have corporate bias because it reports on and exposes corporate corruption. Lehrer asserts that the model amounts to Marxist conception of right-wing false consciousness. So, as a matter of fact, the BJP tried cashing in on this with Chai Pe Charcha campaign strategy before general election 2014, which became one of the most popular mediated buzzword disseminated by the newspapers. So basically, what we are talking about is, like what uh, um, the NAMO, for example, in India, the NAMO Gujarat model of development, so mediated buzzwords were identified, so, like many newspapers have certain buzzwords, they use those words very frequently, and so, I mean, as much as I have read in the most prominent newspapers, they're like majorly anti-right. So, but I mean, so for example, I mean, I don't know what is it in US, how independent the media is, for example, I mean, we have discussed that, they are like corporate based, and like the money which is supplied to them, accordingly they function too. So yeah, I mean, I'll stop it. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And to speak to what you were talking about, here in the United States, well, newspapers are kind of going out of business with the advent of media. But yeah, the media is bought and paid for. They do what their masters tell them to do. So,
Yeah.
but thank you so very much, Tamana. I am very grateful to you. And that is this episode of Sophia's Roulette. And I'm really looking forward to taking questions.